Cleveland just made one of the stranger roster moves of this entire preseason, and I want to walk you through it. Because it's a lot more layered than a simple rookie getting waived. This one has a genuinely bizarre backstory attached to it, and depending on how it plays out, it could end up being one of the more unusual situations we see across the entire league this year. The Browns have waived rookie tight end Quan Wright, and if he clears waivers, according to Adam Schefter, he's expected to head back to college football entirely, with an agreement already reportedly in place to play for LSU this season. Think about that for a second. A player who only recently entered the NFL is potentially about to walk right back out of it and into a college uniform instead. I want to sit with how genuinely rare this specific direction is, because most of the traffic between college football and the NFL only ever moves one way. Players spend years grinding to reach this league, and once they're here, walking away entirely to go play college football again isn't really a well-worn path anyone talks about. That's exactly what makes this story worth slowing down on rather than treating it as a routine roster transaction buried in a Tuesday news cycle. Let's back up and lay out how we actually got here, because the sequence of events is genuinely wild. Wright went undrafted out of Ole Miss, got picked up by the Philadelphia Eagles, and then Cleveland claimed him off waivers from Philadelphia on August 11th. So he's barely been with this organization at all. But while he was still technically under contract with the Browns, he entered the NCAA transfer portal on Thursday. And now, just days later, Cleveland has waived him, effectively clearing the path for him to head back to the college ranks. According to Schefter's reporting, there have actually been several players either still sitting in NFL training camps or already released who've popped up in the transfer portal recently. What makes Wright different is that he's the first one to fully commit to actually returning to a college program rather than just testing the waters. If no other NFL team puts in a claim on him during the waiver process, the expectation is that he heads straight to LSU and reunites with Lane Kiffin, who coached him during his final 2 seasons at Ole Miss before taking the LSU job himself. Here's the detail that genuinely makes this whole story stranger than your typical roster move. There was apparently a real clue that this was coming, and Todd Monken had it sitting right in front of him the entire time. Kiffin had actually reached out to Monken about a week before Wright officially entered the transfer portal. Once everything became public, Monken realized exactly why Kiffin had been trying to get in touch with him in the first place. He even joked afterward that he probably should have called Kiffin back when he had the chance. There's something almost comedic about how that specific detail unfolded. A rival coach reaching out for what most people would assume was a routine, unrelated conversation, only for it to later become clear he was essentially trying to get ahead of a player transaction that hadn't even happened yet. It speaks to how connected the coaching world actually is behind the scenes, and how much groundwork sometimes gets laid quietly before something like this ever becomes public knowledge. The situation gets even stranger once you factor in the actual preseason game against Buffalo. Wright dressed for that game, the one Cleveland ended up losing 31-7, but he never actually took the field. Afterward, when Monken got asked directly about Wright's status, he genuinely seemed caught off guard by the whole thing. His understanding at the time was that Wright had been dealing with a medical issue that had kept him out of practice, and that he'd only recently gotten cleared, which is why the Browns dressed him for that specific game in case they needed him as an option. But clearly, behind the scenes, Wright's actual future was already heading in a completely different direction, one that had nothing to do with anything happening on that Browns roster. There's also a real financial and contractual layer to this whole situation that's worth understanding, because Wright can't simply walk away from his NFL contract and immediately suit up for LSU without consequence. Per league rules, players who return to college football after signing a professional contract have to formally terminate that contract and repay whatever money they'd already received under it. That obligation has to get sorted out before any of this actually becomes official. It's also exactly why the waiver process itself matters so much here. If another NFL team decides to put in a claim on Wright during that window, his entire path back to college football gets interrupted completely. But if he clears waivers without anyone claiming him, the expectation is that he moves forward with LSU and continues his career there under Kiffin instead. That repayment requirement is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it means this isn't some kind of loophole players can casually exploit whenever college football starts looking more appealing than fighting for a roster spot in the NFL. There's a real financial cost attached to walking back through that door, which tells you Wright and his camp clearly believe this specific opportunity, developing further under a coach who already knows exactly how to use him, is worth that cost. That's not a decision players make lightly, and it says something about how much value he and his representation are placing on this particular reunion, with Kiffin specifically. From Wright's personal perspective, this is a genuinely remarkable turn of events. He went from Ole Miss to the NFL, and now, potentially, right back to college football again, all within the span of a single calendar year. That's not a path many players ever take. And it says something about how quickly a young player's circumstances can shift in this league, sometimes for reasons that have very little to do with talent or performance, and everything to do with timing and opportunity. For Cleveland, though, the timing of this move actually makes a lot of practical sense from a pure roster-building standpoint. This team is working toward finalizing its 53-man roster, and at this exact point in the calendar, every single spot matters enormously. With Wright now out of the picture entirely, the Browns have one less unusual, complicated situation to sort through while they're making these final difficult roster decisions over these next several days. I think it's worth appreciating just how much bandwidth a situation like this one actually consumes for a coaching staff during an already hectic stretch of the calendar. Cutdown week is stressful enough under normal circumstances, with dozens of genuinely close roster battles all needing to be evaluated fairly and quickly. Adding a wrinkle, like an active transfer portal situation into that same window, one that requires legal and contractual coordination on top of the usual football evaluation, is exactly the kind of distraction a front office would rather not be managing this late in the process. Resolving it cleanly, even in an unusual way, actually frees up real attention for the decisions that matter most heading into the regular season. And there's still plenty left to actually evaluate before that roster gets locked in. Cleveland has one final preseason game left, against the New England Patriots, and Monken has already confirmed the starters won't be playing in that one, including Nick Chubb, Shader Sanders, and Deshaun Watson. That means this final preseason game is really about the players still fighting for a roster spot, guys who need every last opportunity they can get to make a real case before final cuts arrive. Monken made a point of saying, there are still open roster spots available, and genuinely plenty still to play for in that game. These players aren't just going through the motions to close out a schedule, they're fighting for their actual jobs. Monken also emphasized something bigger than just this specific game, talking about what it actually means to put on a Browns uniform in the first place. Every single time a player steps onto that field wearing that helmet, there's a real expectation attached to it, and that standard applies across the board, to veterans, to rookies, to the guys fighting for the very last spots on this roster. It's not a throwaway line either. It's exactly the kind of standard-setting language you'd expect from a coaching staff trying to build a real culture heading into a season with legitimate expectations attached to it. One specific player Monken singled out as someone he wants to see more of is 6th-round rookie quarterback Talon Green. He's going to get another real opportunity to show what he can do before this coaching staff finalizes its roster decisions. Dillon Gabriel is expected to open that final preseason game at quarterback, which sets up an interesting evaluation window for both of these younger arms heading into cutdown weekend. That specific pairing is worth paying attention to on its own. Gabriel has had a real body of work built up across this preseason already, while Green is still searching for a legitimate opportunity to actually put something on tape that this staff can evaluate fairly. A 6th-round rookie quarterback doesn't get many chances like this one. A real, extended look in a competitive game setting rather than scattered reps buried inside a joint practice. However he performs in that specific window is likely to weigh heavily on whether he sticks around on this roster at all, whether that's on the active 53 or a practice squad spot. if this staff believes there's real developmental upside worth protecting. And then there's the question hanging over absolutely everything else happening around this team right now. Cleveland still has to officially name its starting quarterback. Monken said he expects to make that call on Monday, once he's had the chance to fully evaluate the complete body of work from both Watson and Sanders. That decision obviously carries far more weight than anything involving Wright's situation. But both of these stories are connected by the exact same underlying theme. This organization is running out of runway to make its final decisions. The roster is nearly finalized. This coaching staff is evaluating every remaining piece with real scrutiny. Players are fighting for their careers in real time, and this quarterback competition is finally approaching its actual conclusion. Once that 53-man roster gets locked in, this preseason is officially over, and the real season begins. That's exactly why I think the Wright story is genuinely worth paying attention to, even though he was only actually with this organization for a short stretch. Claimed off waivers from Philadelphia on August 11th, undrafted out of Ole Miss originally, entered the transfer portal while technically still under an active NFL contract. Dressed for the Buffalo game, but never played a single snap. Monken himself was caught off guard when reporters asked him directly about it, even though Kiffin had already reached out beforehand trying to give him a heads up. And now, Wright could genuinely be heading back to LSU within days. That's an incredible sequence of events to happen in such a short window of time. For Wright specifically, this really could be the start of an entirely new chapter in his career. If he clears waivers the way it's currently expected, he'll get the chance to play for Kiffin again and continue developing inside a college program that clearly already knows exactly how to use him. Maybe that eventually leads him right back to the NFL down the road with a stronger, more complete resume behind him. Maybe LSU simply becomes the next real step in a career that's still very much being written. Right now, honestly, nobody actually knows how this plays out. But Cleveland gets to move forward without having to figure out exactly where Wright fits into their final roster, which simplifies at least one small piece of a genuinely complicated week. And that brings us right back to what actually matters most for this organization, heading into the next several days. That final preseason game is coming fast. Green is getting another real look. Gabriel is expected to start under center. Sanders and Watson are both expected to sit that one out entirely. And then, Cleveland is expected to finally make its official quarterback decision. For this fan base, this is genuinely where the anticipation starts becoming real. We've spent this entire offseason and camp talking about possibilities, about what this specific roster could actually become. Now we're finally about to find out what this team genuinely has heading into a real season. That's exciting. But it also comes with real pressure attached to it, because every Browns fan knows exactly how quickly optimism can flip into raised expectations. You look at this roster and start thinking, genuinely, maybe this really is the year. But the decisions being finalized over these next several days are going to determine exactly how much of that optimism actually holds up once real football starts. That's why I'm watching these final roster moves as closely as I am right now. I'm watching every move Monken makes. I'm watching how this quarterback decision actually plays out, and I'm watching the young players still fighting just to stay on this roster at all. Some of them are going to make the cut and become a real part of this franchise's future. Others are going to have to go find their next opportunity somewhere else entirely, the way Wright apparently already has. That's the genuinely difficult part of this exact stretch of the calendar. There's real excitement because football is finally almost here, but there's also real pressure because actual careers are being decided right now, this week, in real time. There's a reason stories like the Wright situation still matter, even during a week when the quarterback decision is dominating every headline. Roster building at this level is never just about the marquee names getting all the attention. It's about every single spot on that 53, the depth pieces, the developmental projects, the players fighting quietly for a chance most fans will never think twice about. Wright's path back to LSU is unusual enough to grab real attention on its own, but it's also a reminder that this entire week is full of smaller, consequential decisions happening simultaneously across this entire organization. Not just the one everyone's been waiting months to hear. I'll be tracking every piece of this closely over the next several days, from how the final preseason game actually plays out for the players fighting for their roster spots, to the moment Cleveland officially names its starting quarterback on Monday. Both stories matter in their own way, and both are worth watching as this franchise finally shifts from possibility into reality heading into the regular season.